You are listening to the Enormocast.
Look, folks, you need gear to climb. Whether you're a wall climber with every gadget under the brutal, withering sun, or just a simple boulderer with 12 pads, a lithium-powered fan, and that portable studio lighting rig for your TikToks. Mon Dieu, even barefoot boulderers need a flowy cotton shirt and a dab of conditioner once in a while. But Sportiva is here to help your footprint and your nagging conscience, because after years of pursuing reductions, in April 2023, Sportiva USA became certified carbon neutral, which means through a combination of sustainable practices, renewable energy, and offsets, Sportiva USA's carbon emission is effectively nil. Is it a perfect balance like ants, trees, and chickadees? Well, probably not, but it is a stated commitment of thought, resources, and budget towards sustainable commerce. Also, remember that the mothership in Italy meets the highest European environmental standards and is a model in the beautiful Val di Fiemme of the Dolomites. So yeah, climbing makes footprints, but go forth knowing that the best climbing boots and shoes don't have to cut too deep with Sportiva. Consider the belayer. Steadfast and sure-footed, the belayer is a breed apart. Often taken for granted, the belayer literally saves your life every single time you punt. And let's face it, that's a lot of disasters averted. Loyal and smart, whether it's the first time you've said take or the 100th, the belayer sits back and holds you right where you want to be while you brush that hold one more time, even though both you and your trusty belayer know it ain't going to change a goddamn thing. The belayer just smiles and says, "Dude, you totally got it next time." Even though there's no way on God's green earth you will in fact get it next time. So maybe it's time to honor the unsung hero of your journey with a fine gift from Peter W. Gilroy. Peter, a belayer himself, knows what a trinket or a sweet splitter hat, the ones with the mountain-inspired titanium badges, will do for a worn-out belayer spirit when you've been riding them hard. Artful jewelry and accessories can be found at peterwgilroy.com for your belayer or any partner you've been forgetting to appreciate during that singular haze of the next burn. So consider your belayer at peterwgilroy.com. One day you might look down and they'll be gone, eating that sandwich they've been thinking about since you took on the second bolt an hour ago. And don't forget to enter Enormo at checkout for a discount and to help this darn podcast.
Listen, where are you playing in town? Are you playing here?
We're doing the Enormo Dome, whatever it is. It's terrific.
Oh,
it's
yeah, the big
house.
place,
sold
that
it
side
out.
of town. That's a big
nice.
place. You sold it out.
20,000 seats.
You really should.
Look, you better get up there before you panic. Those pens are loose. You're very good. I have really enjoyed time with you. We'll make it. I don't think so. But we shall continue with style. Weather, bad weather. Now or later, anytime for climbing.
Today's show is brought to you by Black Diamond Equipment, La Sportiva, and with support from Maxim Ropes. Maxim has been keeping the Enormocast off the deck since 2012.
And don't forget our charter sponsor, Bonfire Coffee. Go to bonfirecoffee.com and enter Enormo at checkout for a discount on great coffee and to support the Enormocast.
And now back to the show.
Hello and welcome to the Enormocast. This is your host, Chris Kalous. It is May 31st, 2023, about 3:30 in the afternoon, and this is episode 264 of the Enormocast, a conversation with Alita Contreras, who is a Venezuelan climber by birth, but Colombian climber in her heart. She is also a nascent filmmaker, a climbing coach, and a damn good rock climber. So we'll get to her in just a second. So I have some sad news. I'm going to miss the International Climbers Festival this year, the ICF in Lander, Wyoming, which is happening in the second weekend of July. I don't know those dates because I'm not going. What do I care? I'm actually going to be doing something interesting. We'll be in Portugal during that time. Got the Enormo jet fueled up and bringing the whole family over there. Though I am a bit sad about this. I don't know how many in a row. I know I've missed a couple over the last decade, but I've been to a lot of international climbing festivals in Lander. I have a lot of friends in Lander. I think it plays a big part in the sort of life and history of this podcast, having kind of gone up there. Actually, during the previous podcast. Anybody remember the previous podcast? Because of contractual agreements, I cannot mention it here. However, Lander, good time, lots of friends, lots of great memories. So I'm going to miss it this year, but I still want to promote it. And they have never once paid me to promote the International Climbers Festival, though I do every single year because I think it's a great festival. And Lander's a fun town, and it's a nice place to be in July. It's hot as balls, actually, but as I've often said, don't worry about how hard you're climbing at a climbing festival, or if you're climbing at all. Of course, Lander does have one of the great climber bars in the country, in the Lander Bar. What's more important, the climbing or the climbing bar? At a festival, I'd argue it's the bar. The other bummer is that a bunch of friends are going to be there, and I want to mention that Katie Brown is presenting at the International Climbers Festival, an old friend of mine and also an awesome guest on the Enormocast. My friend Lauren Calloway is going to be there. Alita, who's in this interview today, is going to be premiering her film there, which we'll talk about in the interview. And I'm sure stacks of other people that I'm not even thinking about are going to be there. Also, Alan Watts is the keynote presenter, who I have never met but I've always admired. Yeah, it's going to be a great time, even without me. I know. It'll take it down a slight notch. Although last year I just sat in my hotel room fretting about my presentation the whole time. But I did bring the crowd to tears, and myself to tears, and Tommy Caldwell to tears. So I guess the fret was worth it. Anyway, look up the schedule, look up the tickets, look up the dates. Climbingfestival.org is the website, and have a good time. Tell me how it was. But don't cry for me. I won't be in Argentina, but I will be in Portugal, followed by Mallorca. Yeah, you don't have to feel sorry for me. Ever. Okay, let's get to Alita. Alita Contreras. Like I said, she is Venezuelan by birth, but Colombian by nature, I guess you might say. And also her father is Colombian, and she spent much of her climbing life there. And she's also making a film, or hopefully has pretty much made the film because it's supposed to premiere in just over a month. I'm sure they'll be working on it to the last minute. That will premiere at Lander, that will highlight women climbers in Colombia. It's called Guerreras, and it's going to be awesome, I bet. Alita is also a climbing coach and has some really interesting things to say about women and the menstrual cycle and how that fits into climbing and training and strength. And frankly, stoke. And before you dudes say, well, I guess that's not for me, I think it'd be helpful if you ever climb with women or ever plan on climbing with women. There, mister, I live in my 2002 Tercel. And there's more in this interview, too, so stay tuned, gentlemen. Okay, let's get to it. A nice international Enormocast with a lovely international accent from Alita Contreras. Is there any fashion statement in climbing more controversial than shorts? Yes, dear listener, I mean short pants, knickers if you will. Too short, too long, too much booty, too little leg, too baggy, and just too darn tight. Well, Guten Tag, Wolfgang. Is that a number 2 Camelot in your pocket, or are you just glad to see me? But in the end, when you do find a pair of shorts you love, it's like a dream pie filled with real dreams. And of course, Black Diamond is here to help you find your dream shorts. From the lightweight flat iron to the bomb-proof Valley shorts, Black Diamond has men and women's shorts for under the harness or a breezy bouldering sesh. The new Dirtbag short even comes in a retro corduroy option, so you can look just like you rolled out of a hazy VW bus in Camp 4 circa 1977.
No, Ranger, sir. You must be smelling that skunk we hit up in Wawona. Poor little guy never had a chance.
So come find your next pair of forever shorts at blackdiamond.com or your favorite local shop. Anyway, we opened earlier on our test recording about me asking you about coffee, and you said you were trying to drink a little bit less. So anyway, how many cups were you drinking before?
Like 6 or 5 cups a day.
Yeah, all day.
That's a lot.
And you can still sleep.
Yeah, well, the last cup that I drink is like at 4:30, because if I drink coffee after that, I don't sleep very well. So I start like the first thing that I do when I wake up is like prepare my coffee. And then I don't know if I told you I am a translator. Well, I have different jobs, but one of them is being a translator. So while I am translating, I am drinking a lot of coffee.
Keep that mind sharp. But you are Colombian, so you're supporting the economy down there by just powering through a bunch of coffee. But what led you to suddenly be like, I think that's too much? Because you told me you were trying to drink a little bit less.
Yeah, but every time that I think that it is too much, I'm going to think I am supporting my economy. I am trying to drink a little bit less because coffee has a lot of properties that are good, but also some that are not that good. Like it's not that good for your metabolism and stomach and many things. And I also tend to have some hormonal problems. And if I drink too much coffee, it doesn't help with that. So yeah, I'm trying to drink less. I'm not going to stop drinking coffee, but I'm just trying to drink instead of, 5 or 6 cups, like only 2 or 3 a day.
Not drinking coffee would be insane, in my opinion. And I've talked to people who are like, I'm like dropping coffee altogether. I'm like, why would you deny yourself that pleasure of the morning cup of coffee? It's like, I'm like so into it.
Yeah, no, I did like a 2-month coffee detox and it was horrible. Like, it's not only that I really like the taste of it, but it's also like part of my routine, like I wake up and I am super happy about preparing my coffee. And then, I don't know, for me, like also drinking a cup of coffee before my training is kind of a ritual, like I drink my cup of coffee and then I am like, okay, I am in training mode. I am ready for this.
If someone, told me if I stop drinking coffee, I'll live like 5 years longer, I think I'd just say, all right, well, those 5 years are probably not the greatest years anyway. So like, I don't know what I would trade for not drinking coffee, but it'd have to be more than that. So, the sound of it, like, I don't know, I use a mocha pot, like the sound of the mocha pot, just like I can get almost like a little proxy coffee feeling just by hearing it. It's really, it's just like, it's what I wake up and it's the first thing I'm like, I can't wait to hear that pot brewing. So, that's beautiful. Like, yeah, it's all the signs of a total addict. That's also the other problem, but whatever. Like I said, there's worse things. Is the way I look at it. I don't smoke, right? Some people get up and smoke a cigarette. So
exactly. Also, that's what I wanted to say. Like, I am very healthy. I don't smoke. I have never done any type of drugs in my life. Like, I don't go party. I have to have something like an addiction or something.
Yes, exactly.
You cannot be that healthy.
Every scientific study that says it's somehow bad for you, there's 10 that say it's good for you. So I just ignore the bad ones. And
me too. I just ignore that too. Yeah, same thing for me.
I didn't mean to get off here on coffee so much, but like I said, you're Colombian. So it's, the first thing you hear as a kid is coffee is from Colombia, although now we know it's also from worldwide. But
nice.
I've been to Colombia. I did a climbing trip there about a decade ago, I think. I've lost track of all that stuff. But I was excited to talk to you because I actually really enjoyed my time in Colombia. I was, I don't know if I was surprised, but it had such a different flavor to other places I'd traveled in South America. Yeah, so I kind of wanted to talk to you about the scene down there in Colombia. Yeah,
well, actually, I was born in Venezuela. I was born there, but my father is Colombian. 20 or 30 years ago, there were like a lot of immigrants from different places going to Venezuela when the economic situation was way better. So my father was one of those people who immigrated to Venezuela, and he just stayed there. He met my mother, and then we were born, like me and my brother and sister. Yeah, so I was born there, and that's where I also grew up. But my father, he loves Colombia very much. So the Colombian culture was always present in our lives. We went to Colombia every single year. Actually, it's very weird because in Venezuela, the only city that I knew was Mérida, the one where I was born. And because all the times, like all the vacations, Christmas, whatever, we went to Colombia. So I didn't know any other city from Venezuela besides Merida, and I knew a lot of cities from Colombia. Yeah, so we were like very close to Colombia. As I said, we weren't there every time, but also like in my house, there were a lot of Colombian things, how we celebrated Christmas or many things like had a lot of, how do you say that, influence from the Colombian culture. So Colombia was always like a very important part of my life. And then due to the economic situation in Venezuela, well, to many problems in Venezuela, I decided to move to Colombia because I have both citizenships, and I've been living in Colombia for the past almost 9 years.
Was it a case that like the situations have flipped a little bit? Did your father go to Venezuela for economic opportunity at that time, or was there some other reason?
Yeah, well, he moved to Venezuela when he was like only 16 years old. It was his mother who decided to move to Venezuela because she found a job in Venezuela. And at that time, the situation in Venezuela was way better than in Colombia. So everybody wanted to go to Venezuela. He could not afford to go to university in Colombia, but he could in Venezuela. So he just stayed there and he went to college. And then, as I said, he met my mother. They got married, and yeah. And since the situation was still better in Venezuela than in Colombia when he graduated, he just stayed there.
Yeah, but it's kind of interesting that the roles have sort of flipped, and leaving Venezuela to Colombia made more sense for you than it did the other way around for your father. So it's kind of interesting that 30 years, how much things changed on both sides of the border.
Yeah, exactly. Like 15 years ago, there were 6 million of Colombians living in Venezuela. And now, like, there are many Venezuelan people from my generation whose fathers or mothers or whatever come from Colombia. So many in my generation have both citizenships, and many of us are like going to Colombia now.
What was the opportunities? Why did you move? What did you move into when you went to Colombia?
I was at the university, and then I graduated, and I just realized that I had no opportunities in Venezuela. Like, there was no future for me in the country because of the situation there. So I was still like living with my parents, and I was like, if I stay here, I'm going to live with them like the rest of my life. My relationship with my parents is really nice, and I love them very much. But, at some point you want to move out. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So, and there was no chance for me for that in Venezuela. And I studied languages. And while I was a student, I had some scholarships, and I lived in Germany and I lived in Canada. And my plan was to go to Germany after finishing school. And I got an offer for a scholarship to do a master in Germany. And it was like kind of an exchange. They sent 2 German students to Venezuela and then 2 Venezuelan students to Germany. And that was going to be my plan, like going to Germany, do this master, and then I wanted to do like a PhD, whatever. But then this organization that was going to give me the scholarship, they sent me a message and they told me like, we cannot risk to send 2 German people to Venezuela because it's too dangerous. So we are not doing this exchange anymore. And I was like, oh, wow. So what am I going to do now? And my sister was already living in Colombia. And I was like very desperate. I didn't want to be in Venezuela anymore. It's sad to say, like, I love my country and it's a beautiful country, but it's very bad, like the situation right now there. So my sister told me, like, why don't you come to Colombia? Like, you have both citizenships and I am here and there are way more opportunities for you. And she told me that, and 10 days later, I moved to Colombia. So it was like a very quick decision.
What was your interest in the outdoors? What was your interest in climbing? Was that at all part of your life in Venezuela before you moved? I mean, where did that come from?
Yeah, I started climbing in Venezuela when I was in the university. And Yeah, actually, most of my family in Colombia are not in Bogota, which is the capital of Colombia. They are close to La Mojarra, the place where you were. But I decided to move to Bogota, even though my family wasn't there, because if you live in Colombia, the best place to live is Bogota, because there are so many climbing areas close to the city, and also the best climbing gyms are in Bogota. So I was like, well, I don't care if my family is somewhere else. I want to go to the place where I can climb the most. So that's why I decided to go to Bogota. Like around Bogota, there are like 8 different climbing places for bouldering and also for sport climbing. And as I said, the best climbing gyms are in that city.
So, I mean, what did it look like to start climbing at university? Was it a gym? Was there kind of a scene? Like, one of the things I'm always interested in is what about it hooks somebody to the point of like, you're a university student, you find climbing, and then all of a sudden, I guess a couple years later, some of your life decisions are centered around climbing, and it's, you just said, oh, I was, make sure I wanted to move to Bogota because there's climbing.
As I said, I started climbing when I was in the university, and it was because a friend of mine was a climber, and I was always interested in the sport. But when I was a kid, I was a professional swimmer. In my childhood, everything I did was like swimming and going to school. I trained like at 5 a.m. in the morning before school. Then I trained like at 1:30 after school, and then in the evening again. So even though I was always like, since I was a kid, interested in climbing, I never tried it because I was a swimmer, and there was no space and time for another sport. But then I stopped swimming when I was like about 15 or 16. Then I did no sports like for 3 years. And then I met a girl who told me that she was a climber. And I was like, oh, wow, I want to try it. And it can sound as a cliche, but really like the first time that I climbed, I was like, how could I live without this? I was so happy. And I bought a membership and I started going to the gym like every single day. And I started getting injured very fast because I didn't want to stop. Climbing gave me a type of happiness that I think that I had never experienced before doing anything else in my life. I did like swimming, but I was not that passionate about swimming as I am and as I was with climbing when I started. So I was so happy every time that I was climbing. Everything was so new. And I think one of the most beautiful things about climbing is that, I don't know, I've been climbing for 15 years, almost 16, and I still have so much to learn. It's not that I can say like, oh, I've been climbing for 16 years. I have learned everything you can learn about climbing. I know everything. You're learning every single day. And I realized that when I started climbing, like, even if you go bouldering every day, each boulder that you try is different. So it's always a new challenge. Like every day you're challenging yourself, like in many different aspects, like physically, but mentally too, emotionally, like many things. Yeah, I decided that I just wanted to do that as much as I could. And I started like planning my life around climbing. Like I was at the university and I loved what I studied, and I have always like all my life like been a good student and have good grades, and that didn't change. Like many climbers start climbing and they stop going to college, or they stop doing their duties, or they start like not having good grades because they only want to climb. That was not my case. I did want to climb all the time, but I also enjoyed very much what I was studying. So, and I am very disciplined and organized. So I planned everything so that I could like go to the university, like do all my homework and also train. And for example, I also love dancing salsa. I am part of a salsa academy, and I invest a lot of time on that too. Climbing is my biggest priority. And for example, if I don't have a lot of time one day, I would prefer not to dance that day instead of not climbing. But still, I really try to organize my life so that I can do all the things that I like doing. And even now, like, I could not say, like, there are many people who say, like, oh, I would be so happy if I could just climb and earn money from that and not do anything else and not work or whatever. I love climbing more than anything else, but I still, like, enjoy having a job, and I still, like, love I don't know, dancing salsa. I have done some very long climbing trips where I can only like climb because you are like in the middle of the mountains or whatever. And then after 3 months, I start like missing like my salsa academy or my job or other things, you know. So as I said, like I do need more things in my life than only climbing, even though climbing is like the center of everything. And I really planned like everything around climbing.
So you studied languages. What languages do you speak or are you fluent in as far as you're translating and things like that?
Yeah, well, the main language of my studies was German, and after German, English, and then French. So I speak the three of them. And as I said, I had the opportunity while I was in college to go to Germany. So I was there doing part of my studies like for more than a year. And then I was able to go to Canada, to the French part of Canada. So I improved my French. Now I am in the US, so I can practice my English. And I work mainly with German and German and English. I don't work that much with French.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how any of this kind of comes together and who you are as a climber. But once you left Venezuela, I mean, did you have opportunities to climb outdoors there? Is there an outdoor climbing scene?
Well, I climbed outdoors for the first time after only 2 weeks.
Oh, yeah.
I in the climbing gym, I met some people who invited me to go climbing outdoors. There were some small climbing areas close to my city, to Merida, and they invited me. And that's, wow. Like, I remember the first time that I climbed outdoors. I was like, okay, I already knew that I love this, but now it's like, I want to marry this sport. I want to marry climbing. But then I moved to Colombia. And then, as I said, close to Bogota, there are so many climbing areas that I could like start going outdoors every single weekend. And I was so happy. And so in Venezuela, I climbed mostly in the gym, and I was also participating a lot in competitions. And then when I moved to Colombia, I was participating in competitions, but my focus changed to outdoor climbing because there were so many climbing areas that I just started like for the first time having projects outdoors. I started like focusing my training on my outdoor projects. That happened in Colombia.
Yeah. So tell me about that. Interfacing with the scene in Colombia. Tell me about the community there, in Bogota.
For me, at the beginning, it was kind of hard because when I arrived to Colombia, I started participating in a lot of competitions. And I was lucky that I participated in 53 competitions in Colombia, and I won 52. But at the beginning, I was the new girl. It's like, who is that? And I was not like welcomed by some climbers, but some of the female climbers, because they were like, who is that girl? I was kind of the new girl. So at the beginning, it was hard for me.
And wait a second, hold on. So you came in and you showed up, and then you basically dominated the competition scene for 52 out of 53 competitions. Yeah, I could see how maybe people were a little annoyed by that. So anyway, sorry. I just wanted to put a point on that. Yeah.
And this is kind of a hard topic for me to talk about,
right.
Because
okay.
I have always felt that I am half Colombian, half Venezuelan, because as I said, I was born in Venezuela, but my father is like the person that I love the most in my life. And he made sure that the Colombian culture was always part of my life. And as I said, we always went to Colombia like every single year, whatever. So I really felt that I was also Colombian. But when I arrived to Colombia, people treated me like the Venezuelan girl.
Right.
And I was always like a foreign, even though I was like, oh, I am half Colombian too, and I feel Colombian too, and I always say that I am also Colombian. Like for many people, I was like the girl from Venezuela, and many people didn't like that the girl from Venezuela was the one who was winning the competitions, So that for me, that was like very hard at the beginning. Like there were competitions where I don't know, I started competing and no one was like shooting me up. And then the older girls came out and competed. And since they were Colombian, then everyone was like shooting them up. And I was like, oh, okay, no one is supporting me, you know. It was hard for me to concentrate sometimes in the competitions, realizing that people were not supporting me. And then at some point I was like, okay, I don't care. Like, I'm just gonna focus on what I have to focus. And if they don't like me to win, then I don't care. And I'm still gonna try to do my best, you know? But then, yeah, I think that's kind of normal, maybe. And then after some months that I started like making friends and whatever, then it changed. But actually, I've been in Colombia for 9 years, and it's still, people consider me to be the Venezuelan girl, you know, which has always, as I said, been hard for me. Like I said, I am Colombian, and people are like, no, you're not. You're Venezuelan. I am like, I am both. You know, that's been always like a hard topic for me, like to feel that I don't belong somehow.
You mentioned 53 competitions. So what warranted moving on from competition, or do you still participate in that part of climbing?
No, I don't anymore, because there was no like federation in Colombia. So
sure.
I was competing a lot, but we could not go to international competitions because there was no like Colombian federation. So I was like, I am putting all my energy and I will not be able to go to any competition, like international competition. So I was like, I don't know, we are always the same girls competing with each other in the national competitions. And I really wanted to go to out the international competitions, but it was not possible. In 2018, I was living in Ecuador for a year because my ex-boyfriend was studying in Ecuador, and there was like a Pan American competition. And even though I was in the city where the competition took place, I was not able to participate because there was not like Colombian Federation. And the Colombian Federation was like in process to be activated again. So I trained a lot for that competition, thinking that maybe at the end of the year, the federation was going to be activated and I would be able to go to that competition. So I trained a lot for that competition. I even started doing speed climbing, which I don't like, because I wanted to go there. And then at the end of the year, the federation was still not activated and I was not able to go to the camp, even though it was in like the city where I was. They didn't have to support me, like I'm in the federation, with anything. I was there and I couldn't go. And I was like, okay, I'm just gonna stop like training for competitions because I'm not going to any competitions. Then I changed like my goals and I said like, okay, then I'm gonna start training for outdoor projects. And for the very first time in my life, I kind of focus on having a goal outdoors to try to send my first 13C. And then I started like training for that goal. And then at the end of the year, I could send my first 13C and my first 13Ds.
So you bailed on Ecuador. So that was back in Colombia that you started refocusing on outdoor climbing?
It was actually in Ecuador.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I was there for a year. And like after 6 months of being there, I realized that I was not going to go to that Pan American competition. So I was like, okay, I'm switching my goal now and I'm gonna like train to be able to climb my first 513C. And then I was like, okay, what I'm gonna do is that at the beginning of next year, I'm gonna go to Mexico, to El Salto, and I'm gonna find a 13C there that I can climb. So that's what I did. So I started working, like training for that, like in, I don't know, July. And then I went to Mexico in January.
Yeah, because I was about to ask you, like, where were you climbing a 513C in Ecuador? I was there like 15 years ago, and I was like searching for rock climbing. Where were you located in Ecuador when you were there?
Sport climbing is more developed. Outdoor sport climbing is more developed in Colombia than in Ecuador. There's not that much sport climbing in Ecuador. But it was also hard to find a partner because my ex-boyfriend was doing his master and he was like very focused on his master. So he was not climbing much. And most of the people that I knew in the gym, they were like more mountaineers than climbers. So they climb a little bit in the gym, but then on the weekends, they always wanted to go to the mountains. So they were always inviting me to go to the mountains, but I wanted to go climbing. So I was like, okay, I'm just going to train very much this year. And I trained a lot in the gym. I didn't go like outdoor climbing that much that year. Yeah. But then I went to Mexico for 2 months and I climbed outdoors the whole 2 months. So it was okay.
A lot of what I like to do on this is talk about evolutions, from gym climbing to outdoor climbing, from competitions to, as you said, to projecting and things like that. What about that evolution to coaching? I imagine, that was something that was probably casual. You were helping friends or climbers that weren't as good as you, and then it evolved into something else entirely. So tell me a little bit about that evolution and when you sort of felt capable of going beyond just casual advice to actual coaching.
Yeah, that, as you say, that was pretty casual. Like when I started climbing, I was so motivated that I never wanted to stop. And because of that, I started getting injured all the time. Because of that, I was like, okay, if I'm going to do this, I'm going to try to do it like in the right way so that I am not injured all the time. So I started like buying books about training and reading books about training and listening to podcasts about training and watching videos and everything. And I started like experimenting with myself with all these things that I was learning in these books. And I was there in the climbing gym, like with my timer and making notes in my notebooks. And then my friends realized like, oh, what are you doing? I was like, yeah, I'm training. I am doing this and that and whatever. And I have to rest 2 minutes between blah, blah, blah. And they were like, oh, would you like to help me too? And I was like, I am not a coach. I am experimenting with myself. And they were like, oh, you can experiment with me too. Then since my friends started asking me, and it was not like only experimenting with my own body anymore, but with other people's bodies, I was like, okay, I have to learn more. So I read more books and I subscribed to some climbing magazines, whatever that had like articles about training. And yeah, I just started like learning more and more. And then when I went to Germany, when I was in the university, as I said, I got a scholarship to go to Germany to study there. And I was competing a lot and I had good results in competitions. So there was a coach who approached me and told me like, oh, because he realized that it was myself who was like planning my own training. And he told me like, oh, so you're a coach. And I was like, no, I am not, but I coach myself. Oh, well, I like what you do and it's giving good results and you're like having good results in competitions. Would you like to like help us with the training of the female team, whatever? And I was like, but I am not a coach. And he was like, yeah, but we can help you. So I started like being a coach in Germany, like working with that team. And they took me to different like workshops and courses and, and then I learned more. And I also learned more by working with these real coaches. And then when I went back to Venezuela, like my friends knew that I was working as a coach in Germany. So they were like, oh, can you help me now? And I'm going to pay you. And they started like paying me a little bit. And then I went to Canada to work in a university and exact the same thing happened. Like I was competing in Canada. The coaches there realized that it was me who was organizing my own training plan. And they asked me like, oh, would you like to help us with the kids? And that's how it happened. So it's crazy because I never looked for it, like I was coaching myself. I was actually in those countries for my language studies. And at some point, I always ended up being a coach in those countries too, which is crazy. And then when I moved to Colombia, I created a group for females, which was very nice. And I also coach some kids. Like I have like my main job has always been like being a translator or a German teacher, but I have always like coach people too.
The mental training thing is something that's kind of blown up in the last few years. You know, what's the basis for your ideas about what that means? Because I think it's it's this term again that you hear a lot, and I think sometimes of fear, right? Like with mental training, like Hazel Finlay does a lot of stuff with outdoor climbing and with fear of falling, and but there's a whole nother aspect I think that goes with competition climbing, which is more handling the pressure and the pressure of competition, of being able to activate your highest performance, basically on demand. So what's the basis of your ideas around mental training? Where does it go?
At the end of the day, I've been coaching maybe 10 years already. And one of the things that I have realized is that in most of my students, the barriers are not physical, but mental. Some of them are super strong, but they cannot climb their best. They cannot perform their best because of some mental thing. And as you said, like when people think of mental training for climbers, the first thing that they think of is like fear of falling, which is true. That happens. And many people are afraid of falling, but it's not the only thing. It's like also fear of failure, is also like anxiety towards a project, like how to handle the motivation because we are not motivated all the time, how to be disciplined with the training. Like these are things that many people do not train. They like, you can see in the gym, people doing like abs and pull-ups with weights and dead hangs and whatever. And then, but they don't give even like 10 minutes to the mental part of it. And I think in my case, it's the other way around. Like, I think my head is like my biggest strength in climbing. I climb things that are harder than other people, not because I am physically stronger than them, but because I can perform my 100%. And most of the people cannot even perform their 50%. So at the end of the day, my 100% is better than the 40% of many people, but if they could perform their 100%, they would climb way better than me. So I think that's my strength. And then since I realized like that's in many people, the biggest weakness and in my case is my strength. Maybe that's how I can help them. One of the biggest problems is that people tend to see climbing or success and failure in climbing in terms of sending or not sending. Like if I send my project, I am successful. If I don't, I suck. And climbing is way more complicated than that and way more beautiful than that. Like if you understand that sending is only a plus, but what makes you a better climber is actually like the whole process that takes you to, at some point, send your project. If you understand that, it's way easier not to get frustrated, and it's way easier to enjoy climbing more, and also to focus like on smaller progresses and actually become better. In order to avoid frustration, climbers tend to focus only on the things that they can do, that they can perform at, so that they don't get frustrated. Like you see in the climbing gyms, I don't know, the guys who are super strong only doing these dynos and doing this like very long moves, powerful moves, but never going to vertical walls because, they are like, they don't want people to see them failing. That's right. The thing. Like if you avoid the things that you are bad at, you'll never be able to improve in those things. You're going to just keep improving in the things that you're good at, but the branch between what you're good at and bad at is going to just keep increasing. So, for example, what I do with my girls in the climbing group that I have for females is that women and men, we have different abilities that are related to our genetics and to our reality as women and men. So for like women, we don't develop much like the white muscle fibers, which are the ones like related to being explosive and being very like physically strong. Men do. So that's like an ability that you can develop better. But women, we have better endurance. We are much more flexible. So what happens is that many women, they never try dynos because we are naturally not good at dynos, because of the type of fibers that we develop. So they never try dynos because why am I going to try a dyno if I am not good at it? And that's exactly what I do in my training is just the other way around. Like, if you are not good at dynos, that's exactly what you should be trying. If you are like naturally good at vertical walls with, I don't know, small crimps and flexibility and whatever, those are already like capacities that you naturally have. So you shouldn't be investing much time on the things that you can already do. You should be investing time on the things that you are not able to do. So just go and do that dyno, and see the things that I suck at as those things that give me like the biggest space to improve. Yeah. And when climbers understand that changes so much, like their approach to climbing, like sending stops being like the center of the climbing, and they focus more like on enjoying the process.
So you keep mentioning women as students. You said you started a group with just women in Colombia, and it sounds like that's sort of part of what you're being hired for here in the U.S. Is that a matter of circumstance, or is that something that you've personally focused on in terms of your coaching?
I started learning about different things because I was my own coach. I had never had the intention of, I'm going to use this with my students. It was for myself. And then when I was in Ecuador, I saw on the internet that there was like a course about female training, not in terms of climbing, but in general terms, like what it is to coach women. And I was like, I'm coaching myself. I am a woman. So maybe I can learn something from this. And it was so interesting. Like, I learned so many things, like about the menstrual cycle, about how our hormones have an impact in our performance in climbing during the different stages of our menstrual cycle, but also how we develop like different muscle fibers than men, and how we can like use that in order to progress in those things that we are not very good at, like naturally. So, I started like using that knowledge with myself, and I saw a lot of improvements. Like, if, I don't know, in my premenstrual week, which is like the weakest week for women because our hormonal levels are very low, maybe if in that week, instead of training very hard, I use that week as my rest week or whatever, or I like lower the training instead of like pushing myself very hard during that week, that could be more beneficial because that week I am weaker, so I am not going to be able to assimilate my training that much, and I am more propense to get injured. So if I do that, how can that like affect my training? And then in the second week of your menstrual cycle, you are super strong because your hormonal levels are very high and your estrogen is super high. And how about like maybe trying my project on that week, because I'm going to be able to not only physically, but also mentally be able to fight more, and my recovery is going to be better, like how about maybe trying that? And when I started like doing those changes in my training, and also like learning how women could train for gaining more strength or to gain more power, because those are like our natural weaknesses. Yeah, when I started using all that knowledge in myself, I saw some improvements in my climbing, but not only in my climbing, also like in my everyday's life, because hormones are, oh my God, especially for women. It's not that men don't have them, but for us, like how they vary in our menstrual cycle is crazy. So I saw these changes and these improvements. And then when I went back to Colombia, I talked to a friend of mine who is the owner of the climbing gym where I train. And I told him like, I did this I took this course and it was very good. And I saw some improvements. I would love to have a training group only for women. and experiment that with them, that knowledge. And he was like, oh, I think it's a great idea. And then I created that group.
Yeah, it's interesting that was new knowledge. I mean, at least applying it specifically to climbing, and yet you had been this athlete as a swimmer for years and years and years. And is and obviously, if we're talking about menstrual cycle and your period and things like that, it's only an intellectual idea for me because I'm a guy and I don't deal with that stuff. So, but was it, to bring that to the table, even for, grown women who understand their menstrual cycle, understand, what it does to them mentally a lot of times or whatever, was it surprising to them for you to bring that, so specifically to the table? Or were you telling them sort of something that they already knew?
Well, actually, yeah, there were many things that surprised them because most of the people think, for example, that our weakest week is the one when we're having our periods. When we have our periods, there are many things going on inside of us. But actually, our hormonal levels are not that bad during that week. Like, we feel, I don't know, we have cramps and that makes everything harder. But in terms of hormones, it's not the worst week. Actually, the worst week is the week before the period. And many people do not know that. Like right. When our bodies are getting prepared to have the menstruation, that's like the worst week. And many people do not know that. Many girls don't know that's actually the week where we are like, we have the biggest tendency to get injured because our hormonal levels are so low. That's the week like that we are also mentally or emotionally feeling the worst. Like many things are happening inside of us. And also many girls didn't know that during the ovulation days, we are stronger. And that's also like very valuable information. You can, on those days, you can train a little bit more. You can push yourself a little bit harder. You can like do more things. You are like more confident. As I said, like many people know about like what happens in the menstrual week, but not in the other 3 weeks of the menstrual cycle.
It's fascinating because, like sports science, if you want to call it that, that I grew up and I'm sure, when you were swimming too, was this era of like, yeah, if you feel terrible, you just push harder. Like that's, exactly. That was your sort of coach's thing. Like, oh, you feel like crap today? Too bad. Like, yeah, suck it up and push harder. And, it's so interesting that we have advanced, I think, in a lot of ways with sports science. And I think climbing's like right at the forefront. I mean, people like yourself, experimenting and trying to apply these things. But it's fascinating to think that there's this whole other idea of looking at, well, why not use these natural things that are happening to better your training, to better your chances of sending, all these sorts of things is pretty fascinating. Again, as opposed to like, oh, you feel like crap, then try harder in an official sense. Like that was just the idea, like push harder, you suck,
and
push
it's
harder,
also, and it's also very important for the mental part. Like, I mean, there are some weeks you cannot always schedule your training perfectly according to your menstrual cycle. Like, for example, sometimes I had competitions during my premenstrual week, which is like the weakest week, and you feel very bad. I mean, the good thing about it is that if you're conscious about this information, if you know what is going on, then you're going to be more patient with yourself. Like, instead of thinking like, oh, I did so bad, I am such a bad climber, I trained this much and today I could not perform. Now that like, oh, this is my premenstrual week. I am supposed to be weak this week. I am not going to be able to perform my best. So I just have to be patient and try my best how it goes. Then it's also very good for your like mental part. Like, what is going. It's good to understand what is going on inside of you so that you can also like be more patient with yourself, and not get frustrated that easily.
Yeah, that's also another thing that I think is growing in this, in our sport is this idea of like not beating yourself up. And I just had an interview come out that I did with Ryan Devlin where I talked about that, this idea of, just kind of for being a little bit kinder to yourself about performance. But it's, it's always been a fine line with coaching, this idea of like not giving up, of, there is some validity to like, well, you don't feel like doing this today, do it anyway. That has to be a part of training. And it is sort of a fine line between like not berating yourself, but also, also not giving up. You know what I mean? Like the fine line between those two things is sort of I think maybe what good coaching is about is trying to create that line without without sending like a young girl home, thinking she's terrible and she sucks, but also trying to motivate that person to, step beyond where they're comfortable.
Yeah, that's true. I think you are super right. Like there is a fine line between like being lazy and being like conscious and listening to your body and seeing what is really going on. Like in my case, as I said at the beginning, I am very disciplined and I am like, this is my training plan and I'm always trying to like follow it, like, and do the 100% of it. And, like I am, very disciplined with that and very strict with that. But I don't know, if I have my period and I'm having like very bad cramps, I am like, okay, I'm not doing the abs because I know it's going to get worse. Or, instead of doing like maximal bouldering and try very hard, I am like, okay, I'm going to do some capillarization exercises and climb like in a very easier intensity or something like that. Like, like listening to your body, because I have also had so many injuries for being like very rigid. I used to be like that. Like if my training plan says that I have to do 100 pull-ups and I have cramps, I'm just going to take 2 more pills and, like to not feel pain and keep doing my training. That's how I used to be. And then the result sometimes can be like you get injured, so I do try to listen to my body more right now, but I am still very disciplined. And I think like in my case, I have really found a way to understand what that fine line is between like being lazy and like, listening to your body.
Right. Or even being, like going the other direction where I'm pushing myself too hard.
Exactly.
Because I mean, as a disciplined person and as someone you said is very, disciplined, that's actually a bit of an endorphin hit too, is when you later on go like, oh, I really went beyond what I was supposed to do. So, you know what I mean? Like, I think people can push themselves too hard and that there's a benefit sometimes if you get away with it. And, and there's a, just the same way there's sort of this benefit in relaxing sometimes, but knowing yourself is one thing. And I think again, like a coach, I think about what that means, and there's so many people out there coaching, and what I mean by like a coach understanding a line between those two things. And for another person, it's easy to understand your line because you're inside your own head. So approaching girls in your case is kind of fascinating in that way.
I think what people also forget is that being disciplined in the sport does not only mean to train hard. Being disciplined also knows to understand when you have to rest, and actually understand that to rest is an important part of the training, because it's actually in the resting time when you assimilate your training. So if you're training too much, if you're like overloading your body, you don't have time to assimilate your training. So it's like if you have done nothing at the end of the day. And also like eating well. So many people think, oh, if I am resting today, I am being lazy. Maybe if you're resting today, you're being disciplined. You're doing what you have to do in order to assimilate the training that you just did.
That means I'm very disciplined because I can rest with the best of them. Let me ask you about this film. I talked to you over the last few months, it's been something that you've been working on with some other filmmakers, and maybe we can seg that into where I tried to start the interview, where we talked a bit about Colombian climbing. So tell me about this film, Guerreras. which is warriors, right? Or something, some sort of translation like that.
Yeah.
Warrior women, I suppose. Tell me about this film.
The story of guerreras, which is like women warriors, that's the translation, is that I have a very good friend who comes from the United States. Her name is Elisa, and she is half from the US, half from Costa Rica. Her mom comes from Costa Rica. She was born here. She got a scholarship to go to Colombia for a year. And that experience that she had in Colombia was very significant for her because it was like the first time that she was really like in touch with the Latin American climbing community and that she was like able to speak Spanish with everyone. So that experience was very important for her and changed her a lot, not only as a human being, but also as a climber. So when she came back to the US, she decided to apply to be an ambassador for a program from Scarpa, tries to improve the immersion of minor communities in the climbing world, like the Latin community, the Afro community. So she applied for that and she became an ambassador. And then she wanted to do a project for Latin America. And even though she's not Colombian, she decided to do her project in Colombia because of that experience that she had. She wanted to do a film about female climbing in Colombia. And she contacted me and told me like, oh, I want to do this film and I want you to be part of it. I want you to be one of the characters of the film. And I was like, oh, wow, I do want to. Thank you. And then that day we started like talking about the film and sharing ideas and everything. And at some point she told me like, I don't know if I'm going to be able to do this thing because it's a lot of work. I have to raise all the money to pay the filmmakers. I don't even know who the filmmakers are going to be. It's like too much. And then I told her, you know what? Let's do it together. I want to be one of the characters of your film, but I also want to help you as much as I can to make it possible because it's too much work for only one person. And from that day, we started working together to make that film a reality. So the first thing was like, we looked for the filmmakers and then we started like doing activities to raise the money for the film. And we worked like for 7 months, like contacting different climbing brands to get sponsorships. Like we created a GoFundMe account. We did different activities as the workshops that I just mentioned to raise as much money as we could. And yeah, so I was invited to give a workshop in the International Climbers Festival this year about mental training. And I talked to them about the film and they were super excited and they invited us to show the film in the International Climbers Festival. So the film has to be ready in July because that's when the festival is going to be. And that's the reason why I went back to Colombia for a month. We filmed for a whole month. And now we're working on the editing part of the film. Yeah. And the film's going to be ready in July. The thing is that since I was invited to present the film in July, we had to start filming like in March in order to get it ready. But we still have not raised the whole amount of money that we have to pay. But the filmmakers are very nice people. And they told us, you know what, let's do it. And then you pay us whenever. So we started filming, even though we don't have the whole amount of money. But now we have to keep like doing different activities to be able to raise the rest of the money for them. Yeah.
Was it a good thing to have the International Climbers Festival drop a deadline on you? Do you think that helped? Would you have gotten it done as quickly without something like that?
That's a good question. I think I don't know. No, yeah. I mean, the International Climbers Festival is huge, so I think it's a great opportunity to be able to show it there. I know that many climbers want to show their films there, and it's an honor that they accepted us. So yeah, it is a good thing. And yeah, it pushed us to work harder to make it happen. So I think it's a positive thing.
It's obviously a film about women climbers based on the title. Why was that important to you as far as Colombia is concerned?
Elisa's story is very related to that, to the fact that she shows that as the main topic. Like she was born here in the U.S. and she started climbing when she was a very small child with her father and her father's friends. And like climbing was very important, has been very important for her all her life. But what she told me is that it was not until that, like, she went to Colombia and started climbing with other women that she really like felt very empowered, and she really assumed climbing as something that was hers and not something that she shared with her father, because for her climbing was like an activity that she did with her father, and for her it was like her father who always wanted to climb, and she was like just accompanying him to spend time with him. But then when she went to Colombia and started climbing with all these women, she was like, oh, this is mine too. And then like it empowered her so much that she started like trying harder things, because when she was here climbing with her father, she was like not trying very hard and climbing only the same grades that her father was always trying. And then she went to Colombia and met these strong women like trying 513s, and she was like, okay, I want to do that too. And she was able to climb her first 513A. And she thinks that it was the fact that she was like climbing with all those older women that empowered her and made her like assume climbing in a different way. So when she came back to the US, she was like, I want to show the story of those women there who empower me and who are like very, how do you say that? Empowerful, like people that empower others. I don't know how to say that.
Right.
Empowering. I mean,
empowering. Yeah.
Empowering. And you know, there is a lack of representation of the Latin American community in the climbing films. Like nowadays, you have a lot of climbing films, but you don't see like many climbers from Latin America in these films. And if you see a film that is done in Latin America, you see like, I don't know, Adam Ondra going to Chile to climb the hardest route there, but you don't see like the community, you don't see like the landscapes or like a lot about the place. Just see like Adam Ondra trying this hard route. And we wanted to show like the community. We also wanted to give Colombia like a better perspective to show people what a beautiful country it is. Because like here in the United States, I have met so many people who don't even know that there is climbing in Colombia. And those who know are like, oh, but this is too dangerous to go there. Like we want to show people that it's a very nice place to go, that there are a lot of very beautiful climbing places, that the country is beautiful, that the people are very nice. So yeah, it's not only about like the female climbing, but also about like showing the country like in a more positive way. And like, yeah, that maybe people get more interested to go to Colombia.
Yeah. I mean, it's like I'm 50 but I grew up in the 80s. And so like, you know, there is still this like hangover about what Colombia is all about, you know, the 80s and the drug wars. And, you know, then we have the remakes of those films and, you know, Pablo Escobar miniseries and all these sorts of things. It's really fascinating that it's hard for, I think, Americans to escape this idea that those things are still happening. And then if you pay attention to politics, you know, there's all the politics around the FARC and all that sort of stuff too. But that was also surprising, not surprising to me, but you know, I'm game to go to these places always. And I'm like, I know better than to have a preconceived notion about what they are. And that was my takeaway, was like, this place is, you know, when I was there, I was like, this place feels safer than many places I've been in the US. I mean, like, you know, it's definitely not like running gun battles in the streets or whatever, you know, the TV shows and the movies might have put into my brain 25 years ago. I was there for 3 or 4 weeks. I can't remember how long. We went to several different climbing areas.
There are many beautiful climbing places in Colombia, but we try to show like the most representative ones. And most of them are in Cundinamarca. Cundinamarca is like the state where Bogota, the capital, is. And as I told you, like, if you're a climber, the best place to be in Colombia would be Bogota, because it is surrounded by different climbing areas. So the thing is that the film is about the story of 6 girls. It was very hard to like choose which girls to include in the film because there are so many strong women in Colombia that have like so beautiful stories. But at the end we have to decide about having only 6 of them. The thing is that also we try to include the climbing areas that where these girls wanted to climb, that were like kind of special for them. Like I am one of these girls and I was filmed in a place named Macheta, which is like 2 hours away from Bogota. And the reason why I was filmed here is because last year I was able to climb my first 514A in Macheta. So they wanted to film me in that route. So they filmed me in that place. And also, not only because of that route, but in general terms, it's my favorite place. So I was like, I want to be filmed there. There is another place like, La Mojarra is also going to be included. La Mojarra is in another state from Colombia named Santander. It's like, I think, the best sport climbing place in Colombia. It has like 400 routes and the approach is very easy. You have like from 5.9 until 5.14D. So like there is something for everyone. It's such a beautiful place. Like, you've been there. So it's a magical place.
Yeah. That's definitely the place I put on the list for anybody that's going down there. Plus the people there are awesome and the situation's pretty much, perfect vacation climbing.
Exactly. It's such a beautiful place. I mean, it's like the climbing is really good, but also only being there is so beautiful. It has a very beautiful energy. So La Mojarra was also included. We included a place named Sutatausa because one of the girls is wanted to be filmed bouldering, and that's like a very good boulder place close to Bogota. We film in Suezca because, Suezca is like the where sport climbing was born, more or less, in Colombia. It's like a very classic place. Not only for sport climbing, but also for trad climbing. It's the best place in Colombia for trad climbing. So there is one girl who is more like a trad climber, and she was filmed in that place. Suezca is like like the oldest place in Colombia in terms of climbing. So it had to be shown because it's where all started. We also filmed in a place named Payandé, which is in another state, in Tolima, because it's really beautiful. Like you have a river in front of the crack, so you can just climb and then get in the river, and it's very beautiful. Yeah, it's another landscape. We wanted to show like different landscapes so that people get to see what Colombia is about, like different landscapes and beautiful places. There is a girl who is like a mountain guide, and she was she was filmed in Suezca, but she was also filmed on the mountains, guiding some older girls. There are some scenes on the mountains too.
What do you think makes the Colombian climbing community special? Like everywhere you go, there's a flavor. I mean, that's part of why climbers, I think, who climb outdoors eventually want to travel to different countries and to different cultures to see what's different. And we talk a lot about the similarities, right? And that's really special to be able to, to show up as I did in Suezca and meet the climbers, and we have this common ground, and they want to know about where I climb, and I want to know about, like we have those commonalities, but then every place is sort of special. What do you think drives the Colombian climbing community that's maybe a little bit special, a little bit different than anywhere else that you've climbed?
Colombian people are very welcoming, and there is a big sense of community in Colombia. Like, I don't know, maybe this sounds stupid or small or whatever, but for example, here in the United States, the fact that public transportation almost does not exist, and everyone is like driving their own cars, like isolated in their cars, or that you don't have here like these small like grocery stores in the corners as you have them in Colombia, that you can just walk to the grocery store and this is a small place and every day you interact with the same person who kind of becomes your friend. But here you have like this big Walmart, change, supermarkets, whatever. And every time you go to that supermarket, then the people working there are different and you don't get to interact very much with them. Like, it doesn't help you to create this sense of community because you are not really like interacting very much with the people that you see like in the stores or whatever, because it always changes. In Colombia, that's different. Like, you interact a lot with strangers, like when you are waiting for the bus, when you go to the store, whatever. So in Colombia, we have like this bigger sense of interacting with others and, you know, like talking to other people and getting to know other people. It's like, yeah, more a community sense. Here in the United States, it is like little bit isolated, like you don't interact that much with others. And I think that you can see that in the climbing community too. That is also reflected in the climbing community. So yes, people or climbers here in the United States are very nice people, but in Colombia, people are like warmer, you know, like very caring, like they really want to get to know you, to interact more with you. I think people in the United States are very concerned about maybe not getting too much in someone else's space. In Colombia, we're like always like going to you and hugging people, and you know, so I think that's what my friend Elisa felt in Colombia, that people were super warm, and that even though people didn't know her, like they were like, they met her and the same day they were like, oh, you want to come to my house? We're going to prepare like a Colombian food for you since you are from the US, and let's go climbing tomorrow again. And you know, like, it's easier to make friends in Colombia because people are willing more like to interact or are not that afraid of maybe going into someone else's space, you know? So I think that's why people who are from other countries feel so good in Colombia or so welcome, because people show you like their interest in like getting to know you. And I think that's very special in Colombia.
So you're possibly going to move, not permanently, but on a more long-term basis to the U.S. What are you going to miss? What's the things that you'll probably be pining for a few months into living outside of Atlanta from Colombia?
The fact that there is almost not public transportation here, like, makes me crazy. The fact that everyone is like driving their own cars. In Bogota, I was used to bike all the time. I had a car and I only used it to go outdoor climbing. Otherwise, I was always biking in the city. But here, like, the cities are designed not for people, but for cars. So there are many people who ask me, like, do you like Atlanta? And I am like, I don't know the city, because you are always like on the highway, and then you take the exit to get to the place where you want to go, but you never get to really see or know the city. You just like see the places where you're going to. Otherwise, you're always on the highway. So you always feel kind of isolated. You're always on the highway like between other cars. I miss very much like biking in the city and having the opportunity to bike or to walk everywhere. I remember there was one day here that I needed to go to the pharmacy, and I saw on Google that it would only take me 10 minutes walking to get to the pharmacy. And I was like, okay, I'm going to walk. Oh my God, like, there were no pedestrian walks to go there. So I was like beside the cars, like trying to get to the pharmacy. And I was like, what is this? Next time that I go to the pharmacy, I have to go with my car because it's very dangerous to walk there. So I think that's something that I'm going to miss very much. And yeah, what I told you that about, like, yeah, for example, here in the US, now that I'm working with kids, I had to do this workshop with safe sports. We are not allowed to like interact very much with the kids that we train. So you are not allowed like to hug them or to touch them. You know, like in Colombia with the kids that I used to work, the interaction was different. Like when they sent their projects, they came and hugged me, and you know, it was like a whole party. And here it's like when a kid sends his or her project, I am like, oh, good job, you know, but I am not allowed to hug them or to kiss them, which in Colombia would be normal. And for me, that's kind of weird. Like I am a person who needs a lot of like physical contact, but because that's how we are in Latin America, we hug each other, we kiss each other. And, you know, and here it's like people are not used to that. And we are not allowed to do that with the kids that we coach. So for me, it's always like trying to stop myself from giving too much love to someone.
All right, folks, thanks for listening, and thanks to Alita for sitting down and connecting from Georgia, of all places. There you go. Some love for Georgian climbers. Sort of. Not really. Roundabout. She was in Georgia. Anyhow, if you want to connect with Alita yourself, follow what she's doing. Of course, Instagram is probably the best place. Alita Climbing is her handle over there at Instagram. And of course, you can go to the International Climbers Festival to see the premiere of their film. But I'm sure then after that, it will go around the country, be available here and there. So reach out and support what she's doing, whatever she's doing, spreading that love in the world. And the GoFundMe for the film is still open. There's a link on Alita's Instagram page. Okay, then. I hope the weather's good where you are. You're getting out. It's warm, but not too warm. Shirts off, but only in an appropriate way. And I hope that there's a small, cool breeze flowing across your fingertips just before you grab that crimp, making it feel sticky so you can pull down and find glory at the chains or the quad, the bunny ears, the girth hitch anchor, or maybe it's just a giant stick pounded into the mud. Whatever you're using for an anchor, don't forget to check your knots.
Huh? Why do you say you feel trapped in a man's body?
Well, sometimes I get the menstrual cramps real hard.